Public sector organizations in Europe that are part of the European Union are bound by the European directives to tender all contracts of a certain value in the Official Journal of European Union and to allow a certain time frame for response from suppliers. The public sector buyer will first identify services or goods they need and then determine their values. Thereafter, if the value of the goods and services required falls below the European threshold, their procurement policy will be applied insofar as it helps them meet their needs, selecting suppliers that are fit to supply. This simply means suppliers who have the capacity, competency, and track record to deliver the goods and services at the price point that offers value for money. The process of soliciting suppliers to bid for contracts can take many forms depending on a number of factors. In brief, the buyer can use competitive bidding via formal tenders, requests for quotes, requests for proposals, requests for information. Competitive bidding means inviting more than one supplier to submit bids or tenders for the opportunity. Request for quote is a documentation used to invite a selected pool of suppliers to submit quotations for the supply of goods and services. The buyer's specification is final and all that is required from the supplier is a quote, i.e., the price or fee to supply and deliver the products or services. Request for proposal, on the other hand, is a solicitation process involving suppliers being asked to submit detailed methodology to solve a problem the buyer is seeking to address and to offer a quote on the price or fee for doing so. Please read your workbook to find out more on how this applies in practice, as well as the definition of request of information. We have given you a lot more detailed templates to help your understanding. Another point to note is that buyers' approach is influenced by the size of their purchase. Small contracts take a less rigorous approach because they are less risky to the organization. By small contracts, we mean small in financial value terms. Large contracts take a much more rigorous approach because they by nature carry a high-risk exposure for the buyer. Finally, buyers sometimes have a database of approved suppliers and pre-qualified suppliers that they will prefer to work with. Approved suppliers are those that have met the minimum criteria for fitness to supply the organization. They may have no track record delivering services or products to the buyer's organization. The converse of this is the pre-qualified supplier, where they have met the minimum criteria to supply the market, as well as have a good track record delivering services and products to the buyer's organization. The learning point here is to contract as many public sector organizations to find out about the approved supplier application process and get approved by them. Also, registering your business with relevant portals where contracts are advertised is critical. We have offered you details of the portals and steps to take to register with them inside your Learning Center. Usually, the public sector buyer will tender for contracts of significant value, usually of £5,000, using tendering portals as well as known trade journals and IT-owned websites to comply with best practices. If the value of the contract exceeds the EU directives for open tender, then the contract will be put to tender on the Official Journal of European Union website, as well as the public sector's own website and any other suitable trade journals. The format that most public sector buyers use to procure goods and services is broadly similar. After determining the value of the contract, a typical public sector buyer, as part of their procurement processes, will determine the minimum criteria the supplier should meet for them to be considered for the delivery of the contract. These criteria will be detailed in the information pack sent to the businesses that request it and will also be included in the pre-qualification questionnaire. As mentioned earlier, the PQQ is the document that is used to gather information that is required to satisfy the buyer that the business meets the minimum criteria necessary to deliver the contract. The public sector buyer will usually ensure that these criteria are specified clearly, and where further information is required in cases of lack of clarity, details of who to contact in the buyer's organization, usually a procurement officer, and the preferred contact method will be specified in the information pack sent to all potential suppliers responding to the invitation to express an interest. The learning point here is this: irrespective of where your business is at this point in time, knowing what buyers are looking for helps you put strategies in place for improving your supply capability to the buying organization. The information pack will also include details of how the public sector buyers intend to evaluate suppliers' fitness to bid for the contract. It is always important for the supplier to understand the evaluation processes very clearly and make an informed judgment on whether they possess the minimum requirements to tender. Usually, when businesses fail in their bidding, it is because they fail to understand and/or satisfy the public sector buyers that they meet the minimum requirements. In some cases, as we will cover later, businesses make silly mistakes on their forms which of course lead to a lower score and pull their overall score down. Anyway, back to the tendering process. There is always a deadline that businesses are requested to submit their PQQ by, and it is important that this deadline is met. Furthermore, there is always a standard format that should be used to address the returned PQQ and relevant documentation. This format should be adhered to, otherwise a business risks having its